So, continuing the relationship astrology series, now we're talking about Synastry and Saturn. So, Saturn in Synastry shows, strength and a certain glue that comes across as commitment, but also perhaps control. Saturn gives focus, determination, effort, control. And it can be difficult, for sure. It can be difficult placements. You always have to reckon with Saturn somehow. And usually, long-term relationships have a certain Saturn component to them. There's usually some sort of willingness to make a commitment to the other person that shows with Saturn. So it's not such a casual interaction, and it also shows the need for it to not be so casual. So you'll often see Saturn, in someone's first house or someone's seventh house, or join their seventh house ruler, or join Venus by conjunction, or maybe also by aspect. I'm going to be talking about aspects in an upcoming video. But you have to reckon with Saturn, and usually, I don't mind seeing some Saturn, some Saturn connection through Synastry, because it's always, it's that connection that can show a certain glue and a certain commitment that the people have to each other. But again, it doesn't necessarily feel so good. In the scriptures, especially not just especially in Parashara, but Parashara definitely talks about how Saturn is like the sun. Many times, like when he gives certain indications, he'll say Saturn is just like the sun. Like after he's already said, if the sun is joined Venus, it shows blah blah. And then when he gets to Saturn, he'll say Saturn is just like the sun. So he might go through each planet. And then when he gets to Saturn, he says Saturn is just like the sun. So it's quite similar, but it's like the shadow side of the sun. They have a similar goal, but a different reason for it. Like they both show consistency, commitment, power, but they do it for different reasons. The sun is more inspiring, uplifting, because of all the good that can happen, because the sun is sattvic. And Saturn will often make a commitment because of avoiding trouble, avoiding pain, that sort of thing. So I said it in the sun video that often when you get the sun and the moon, that's a strong glue. Sun and Saturn is also a strong glue, but again, Saturn and the moon is also a strong glue, but it's one that feels more heavy, and it feels like there's maybe some domination going on, or the potential for that sort of domination that you always have to be careful of, and that level of control. Sometimes, in particular, a man's Saturn on a woman's moon can give a similar feeling to the man's sun on the woman's moon. It can be comforting, but it can also be heavy. It's more of a daddy kind of energy, not a husband kind of energy. So after a while, Saturn moon can wear down the moon person, for instance. And so, again, it's just that sort of natural quality of Saturn. You do see that people will take each other seriously wherever Saturn is relating. And so those are that's a sort of overview of Saturn in Synastry, when you get one person's Saturn on the other person's Saturn. So for each individual planet, again, I've actually already done this in the earlier videos, but I'll just do it again. Saturn on the sun can show where, where there might be a lack of confidence on the sun person. Their confidence might be pushed down. The Saturn person, there could be a sort of igniting of that person's, that person's commitments. But then the sun person, again, feels that sort of lack of confidence, perhaps. Saturn moon, similar. For instance, you wouldn't mind seeing, I would say it's better to see, for like the woman's Saturn on the man's sun, right? It might show bringing down the confidence a little bit, but it's also going to show that the woman makes a commitment to the man's vision, for instance. Man's Saturn, woman's sun, again, it's a similar kind of energy, but because the woman is less bound to her sun in a relationship, you would see it that way. Man, sun, woman's moon. I'm sorry, man, Saturn, woman's moon. Again, Saturn on the moon feels like the sun, but heavier, more. It can be some, domination. If other things aren't present, it could definitely feel oppressive and very controlling to the woman. But you'll see that the man is willing to make a commitment to you. Again, woman's Saturn on man's moon, not as good. The woman is in the the woman is being responsible. Saturn for the man's feelings. Again, it's could put the woman in the sort of mommying role. Saturn, Mars in neither direction is so good. When you see that, again, there could definitely be a sort of power play happening. Either person's Saturn on either person's Mars. They're naturally not such good friends with each other. The Mars person will benefit more because Saturn exalts Mars, and the Saturn person will definitely not benefit as much from that. He'll feel like, or she'll feel like, her efforts to have things be solid and steady are constantly being undermined and rebelled against by the Mars person. Saturn, Mercury, not so bad either way. Like I talked about in the earlier video on Mercury, Saturn tends to really bring form and shape to Mercury ideas. So it could actually be a good place where they can come together around things that don't have a lot of charge, where they could maybe be able to work things out. That being Saturn, Mercury. Saturn, Jupiter, kind of average. They have a sort of neutral relationship with each other. You can see where people may make a commitment to things, together, especially things that are motivating. Because Jupiter is about plans and ideas and big things that inspire us, and Saturn is about the commitments. So you could see these things maybe coming into fruition, but you also might see where, especially the Jupiter person, isn't going to experience Saturn so easily. The Jupiter person may feel that their hopes are somewhat dashed and somewhat brought down by Saturn's practical, rational assessment. Saturn, Venus, not as bad as you might think. It's kind of like Saturn, Moon, but Saturn, Venus is more universal. It can show some grace for sure. The Venus person would feel the intensity of Saturn, especially in the way of maybe not being as romantic maybe, or as turned on. But it could certainly bring a commitment to the partnership. You can just feel that because Venus is the karaka of the relationship and Saturn is about making a commitment. So that could be important. Saturn, Rahu, or Saturn, Ketu, again, not so good. They're both Rahu and Ketu have to do with confusing things. And, Saturn, Rahu can just kind of be all over the place with the Saturn person trying to make plans and the Rahu person feels controlled, or they can just feel sort of rebelling against the plans of Saturn. Saturn, Ketu through Synastry. Again, Ketu is very sort of disapproving and can be sort of rejecting of the other person's plans and fears. The way we tend to experience Saturn is through our fears. We all have fears in one way or another. So whoever is the Saturn person in that Synastry, it's going to be like their fears and their desire to want to control things and manage things and sort of manage their fears. Again, that's just the origin. It's not necessarily like they're just fearful, but it's where if someone doesn't appreciate that, it can just feel like they're just always tweaking and trying to destroy our structure. That's what structure is. The structure of Saturn, like our money and our health and the things we build around us, is so that we feel safe. It's the sort of baseline. So again, that natural desire that we all have to feel safe, it can lead us into other things, into protective, into controlling behavior. So this is what we have to understand about Saturn in general. And so when it then comes into contact with another person's planets, we have to see how that might lead to a sort of domination structure or something where the person's rebelling against that need and that desire for consistency and what have you. So, of course, Saturn in the person's 7th house. Saturn has what's called directional strength in the 7th house, so it can actually, again, show show a nice commitment to marriage and long-term partnership. Whoever has whoever is, has the seventh house there could definitely feel that the person will make a commitment to them. Because like if someone has a Cancer ascendant and Saturn is in Capricorn, the Cancer person will naturally feel the commitment of the Saturn in Capricorn person, for instance, because it'll be in their seventh house. Saturn first house doesn't feel as good. Although there will still be a commitment, it can feel like control. They'll really feel that person's fears very, very viscerally. Like if that same person, if there's, let's say, Saturn in Capricorn and the person has a Capricorn ascendant, they'll really feel that other person's fears and feel that sort of control very easily. So this is the way we would expect Saturn through synastry to behave.